Dr. Sarah Chen wiped sweat from her forehead as she adjusted the environmental controls in her makeshift laboratory aboard the research vessel Times Harmony's Edge Asterisk. 3 months into their deep space exploration mission, she had grown used to the constant hum of the ship's engines and the occasional tremor when they dropped out of hyperspace. What she hadn't grown used to was the sound now echoing through the hull. A low, haunting wail that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Chen to bridge," she called into her comm unit. "Captain, are you picking up that sound on the sensors?" Captain Morrison's voice crackled back. "We've been tracking it for the last 6 hours, Doc. It's coming from the asteroid field we're approaching. Sounds almost like, well, like something's in pain." Sarah's hand tightened on her tablet. As the mission's xenobiologist, she had studied dozens of alien species, but nothing had prepared her for the raw anguish in that cry. It wasn't mechanical or artificial. It was organic, desperate, and getting stronger as they moved closer to its source. "Permission to take a shuttle to investigate." "Captain?" A pause. "Chen, we don't know what's out there. Could be dangerous." "That's exactly why we need to investigate," Sarah replied, already pulling on her EVA suit. "If there's a sentient being in distress, we can't just ignore it. It goes against everything we stand for as humans." 20 minutes later, Sarah was piloting a maintenance shuttle through the asteroid field, following the source of the cries. Her enhanced sensors painted a 3-dimensional map of the floating rocks ahead, and what she saw made her gasp. Wedged between 2 massive asteroids was something that defied easy description. The creature was enormous, easily 100 meters long, with a serpentine body covered in scales that seemed to shift between silver and pearl white. But it wasn't the size that caught Sarah's attention. It was the obvious signs of distress. Thick metal cables had somehow become wrapped around the creature's torso and wings, cutting deep into its flesh. Sparks flew from damaged sections of what appeared to be some kind of alien restraint system, sending jolts of energy through the being's body with each pulse. "My God," Sarah whispered into her comm. "Captain, I'm looking at what appears to be a trapped alien creature. It's beautiful, but it's being tortured by some kind of restraint system. Any signs of the beings who put it there?" Sarah scanned the area carefully. "Negative. Just debris from what looks like a destroyed ship. The restraint system appears to be malfunctioning, sending electrical charges through the creature every few seconds." She watched in horror as another pulse of energy coursed through the cables, and the creature's agonized cry filled her helmet speakers. Its pale, almost translucent scales rippled with each shock, and she could see wounds where the metal had cut through its hide. "I'm going in closer," Sarah announced. "Chen, that thing could be dangerous. We don't know." "Look at it, Captain," Sarah interrupted, maneuvering her shuttle between the asteroids. "It's not attacking anything. It's trapped and suffering. How is helping something in pain dangerous?" As she drew closer, Sarah got a better look at the creature's head. It was elongated and elegant, with large, intelligent eyes that tracked her movement. But what struck her most was the expression in those eyes. Not rage or aggression, but a kind of resigned desperation, as if the creature had given up hope of rescue. "Hello there," Sarah whispered, knowing the creature couldn't hear her but feeling compelled to speak anyway. "I'm going to help you, okay? Just hold on." She docked her shuttle against one of the smaller asteroids and activated her suit's magnetic boots. The EVA to reach the creature took 15 minutes of careful movement along the asteroid surface. But finally, she stood just a few meters away from the trapped being. Up close, the creature was even more magnificent. Its scales weren't just white. They were opalescent, shifting between pearl, silver, and the faintest hint of blue depending on how the light hit them. But the beauty was marred by the obvious pain. The restraint system consisted of a complex network of adaptive metal cables that seemed to tighten whenever the creature moved. And every 30 seconds, a pulse of energy would course through the entire network. Sarah activated her suit's external speakers. "Can you understand me?" she asked softly. The creature's large eyes, each one the size of a dinner plate, focused on her with startling intelligence. It made a sound, different from the cries of pain, almost like a musical note played on a broken instrument. "I'm going to help you," Sarah said, pulling her tools from her utility belt. "This is going to take a while, but I'm not leaving you here." She approached the nearest cable junction, where several of the restraint lines met in a complex knot of metal and energy conduits. Her scanner told her the system was definitely alien in origin. The technology was unlike anything in human databases. But pain was universal, and the determination to end suffering was something Sarah understood perfectly. The first cable took her 40 minutes to cut through. The metal was incredibly tough, and she had to work carefully to avoid triggering any defensive systems. When it finally snapped, the creature made that musical sound again, and some of the tension in its massive body seemed to ease. "That's one," Sarah said encouragingly. "Only about 20 more to go." As she worked, Sarah found herself talking to the creature, explaining what she was doing, offering encouragement, sharing stories from her childhood on Earth. The creature seemed to listen, its eyes following her movements, its musical responses coming at regular intervals, as if it were participating in the conversation. Hours passed. Sarah's hands were cramping inside her gloves, her air supply was running low, and she had to return to her shuttle twice to recharge her tools and replenish her oxygen. But she didn't give up. Every cable she cut seemed to bring more relief to the creature, and those intelligent eyes never lost their focus on her work. "You know," Sarah said as she attacked the 12th cable, "where I come from, we have legends about creatures like you. We call them dragons. In the old stories, they were either terrible monsters or wise guardians. You definitely seem like a guardian type to me." The creature's response was a complex series of melodic notes that almost sounded like laughter. By the time Sarah reached the final cluster of cables, she had been working for over 8 hours. Her suit's systems were running on reserves, her body ached, and she could barely feel her fingers. But she was so close. The main restraint harness was held in place by just 3 more connections. "Almost there," she whispered, positioning her cutting tool against the penultimate cable. "Just hold on a little longer." The second-to-last cable snapped with a shower of sparks, and suddenly, the creature's massive body shifted. For a moment, Sarah thought she had made a mistake, that the being was going to thrash in its pain and crush her against the asteroids. Instead, the creature carefully, gently, moved one of its enormous clawed hands to hover protectively over Sarah's position, shielding her from the floating debris. "Thank you," Sarah said softly. And the creature's musical response was warm and grateful. The final cable was the thickest and most complex. It connected directly to what appeared to be the control unit for the entire restraint system. And cutting it would require Sarah to position herself directly underneath the creature's massive torso. If something went wrong, if the being panicked or moved suddenly, she would be crushed instantly. Sarah looked up into those intelligent eyes and made her decision. She trusted this creature completely. Positioning herself beneath the connection point, Sarah began the delicate work of disabling the final restraint. The cutting process was agonizingly slow. The metal was infused with some kind of energy field that fought against her tools. Sparks fell around her like deadly rain, and the creature's breathing caused small tremors in the asteroid beneath her feet. Finally, with a sound like a breaking bell, the last cable snapped. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The creature's entire body seemed to expand as if it had been holding its breath for years. The pale scales brightened, shifting from pearl white to a brilliant silver that caught and reflected the light of distant stars. And then, something extraordinary happened. The creature began to sing. It wasn't the broken musical notes Sarah had heard before, but a complex, beautiful melody that seemed to resonate through the vacuum of space itself. The song was joy and gratitude and something else. Something that felt like a welcome, like an invitation, like a promise. As the melody filled her helmet speakers, Sarah watched in amazement as the creature's wounds began to heal themselves. The deep cuts left by the cables closed and smoothed over, leaving unblemished scales that gleamed like polished mirrors. The being's eyes brightened from dim gray to a brilliant blue-white that reminded Sarah of Earth's clearest skies. But the most stunning change was in the creature's size. Freed from the restraints, it began to unfold wings that had been pinned against its body for who knew how long. The wings spread wider and wider until they dwarfed the asteroids around them, Membranes stretched between delicate bone structures, catching and reflecting starlight like solar panels made of captured aurora. Sarah stood transfixed, her small human form dwarfed by the magnificent being she had freed. The creature lowered its great head until it was just meters from her helmet. And for a long moment, human and alien regarded each other in perfect understanding. Then the creature did something that would change everything Sarah thought she knew about first contact, about alien intelligence, and about the universe itself. It spoke directly into her mind. The voice was warm, ancient, and filled with an intelligence that spanned millennia. It spoke not in words but in concepts and images that flowed into Sarah's consciousness like warm honey. She saw flashes of distant worlds, of civilizations that had risen and fallen, while humans were still learning to make fire, of a vast network of beings like this one, who served as guardians and protectors throughout the galaxy. And she saw herself, small, determined, refusing to give up even when faced with a task that seemed impossible. She saw her actions through the creature's perception, and what she saw there took her breath away. In the creature's mind, Sarah wasn't just a human who had happened to free it from a trap. She was something far more significant. She was proof that humanity possessed something rare and precious in the galaxy. The willingness to help others, even at great personal cost. Even when there was no benefit to themselves. Even when the task seemed impossible. The creature had been testing her, she realized. Not maliciously, but out of necessity. It had been waiting for someone, some species, that would prove worthy of a great gift. And Sarah, through her stubborn compassion and refusal to give up, had just passed that test. As the creature's massive form began to move away from the asteroids, it left something behind. A small, crystalline scale that drifted toward Sarah's gloved hand. When she touched it, her mind filled with coordinates, with knowledge, with an invitation to something that would change the course of human history. The creature's final mental message was simple but profound. Your people have proven themselves worthy. The alliance awaits. As Sarah watched the magnificent being disappear into the depths of space, its wings carrying it toward distant stars, she realized that her simple act of compassion had just opened the door to humanity's future among the stars. But she also knew that the real challenges were only just beginning. Sarah's hands shook as she held the crystalline scale in her ship's main laboratory. 3 days had passed since her encounter with the dragon-like being, and she still couldn't fully process what had happened. The scale itself defied analysis. Her instruments detected it was there, could measure its basic dimensions, but couldn't identify what it was made of. It seemed to exist slightly outside normal space-time, generating its own faint gravitational field and emitting energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible. Captain Morrison stood beside her, along with the ship's chief engineer, Commander Torres, and their communications specialist, Lieutenant Kim. The entire senior staff had been briefed on Sarah's encounter, though she suspected they still thought she might be suffering from space-induced hallucinations. "Run it again, Doc," Captain Morrison said quietly. "Show them what you showed me." Sarah nodded and placed her hand on the crystalline scale. Immediately, the laboratory filled with holographic projections that seemed to emanate from the scale itself. Star charts appeared in 3 dimensions around them, showing not just stellar positions but also faster-than-light travel routes, inhabited worlds, and most remarkably, the locations of other species' homeworlds. "This is impossible," Commander Torres whispered, walking through a holographic representation of a solar system none of them recognized. "The processing power required to generate this display would exceed our ship's entire computer core by a factor of 1,000. Lieutenant Kim was studying a section that appeared to show communication networks. "Captain, if this is accurate, there are over 200 intelligent species in our local galactic arm alone, and they're all connected through some kind of instantaneous communication grid." But it was the section labeled with human symbols that made Sarah's heart race every time she looked at it. The scale's projections showed Earth, Luna, Mars, and all of humanity's current colonies. But it also showed projected expansion routes, marked with symbols that clearly indicated pending approval or under consideration. "They've been watching us," Sarah said softly. "The being I freed, and others like it. They're part of something called the Preservation Alliance, a group of the galaxy's oldest species who guide younger races through their development. Captain Morrison frowned. Guide them how? Sarah manipulated the holographic display, bringing up what appeared to be historical records. Images flowed past them, showing various alien species at different stages of development, and in each case, there were signs of subtle intervention, advanced technologies appearing at crucial moments, natural disasters being mysteriously averted, aggressive species finding their expansion suddenly limited by natural barriers. They don't directly interfere, Sarah explained, but they do protect promising species from destroying themselves or being destroyed by others. The being I freed wasn't just trapped randomly. It was there as a test. They've been testing us. Testing us how? Commander Torres asked, though Sarah could see she was beginning to understand. By presenting us with moral choices. Every time humans have encountered something that needed help. Every time we've chosen compassion over profit, protection over exploitation. They've been watching. Our response to the Kepler crisis 5 years ago, when we diverted 3 colony ships to evacuate civilians from a war zone, our medical missions to species that couldn't repay us, our environmental restoration projects on dead worlds that had no strategic value. Lieutenant Kim looked stunned. They've been keeping score. More than that, Sarah said, calling up another section of the display. They've been preparing us. Sarah, the new projection showed what appeared to be Earth's immediate stellar neighborhood, but with additional information overlaid. Several star systems were marked with warning symbols, and others showed signs of industrial activity that didn't match any known human operations. There are species in our region who don't share the Alliance's philosophy, Sarah continued. They see younger races as resources to be exploited or threats to be eliminated. The Alliance has been protecting us from them while we developed, but we're approaching a point where we'll be discovered regardless. Captain Morrison studied the displays with a military officer's eye for strategic implications. So what exactly is this invitation you mentioned? Sarah took a deep breath and activated the final section of the projection. What appeared before them was unlike anything they had ever seen. A massive space station that seemed to be built around an entire star system, with structures that dwarfed planets and accommodated hundreds of different species. Alliance Central, Sarah said. They're offering us membership in the Preservation Alliance, but only if we prove we truly deserve it. What kind of proof? Commander Torres asked. The answer came not from Sarah, but from the scale itself. The crystalline object pulsed with light. And suddenly the laboratory was filled with a voice that seemed to speak directly to their minds. Not the warm, ancient presence Sarah had experienced with the dragon, but something more formal, more official. Humans of the vessel Harmony's Edge, you have been chosen as representatives of your species for preliminary evaluation. Your actions in freeing our guardian from artificial constraints demonstrate the compassion and determination we value in potential Alliance members. However, full membership requires a greater test. The holographic display shifted, showing a star system about 30 light-years from their current position. In the Kepler 442 system, a young species faces extinction. The Ravagers, a predatory race that consumes other civilizations, have marked this species for harvest. Their technology is far superior to both the target species and your own. The Alliance cannot intervene directly due to ancient agreements, but a new member species may act independently. Lieutenant Kim's face had gone pale. They're asking us to fight a war we can't win. No, Captain Morrison said slowly, and Sarah could see he was beginning to understand the real test. They're asking us to try. Win or lose, they want to see what we'll do when faced with impossible odds and innocent lives at stake. The voice continued. Should you choose to accept this responsibility, you will be provided with Alliance technology sufficient to make your intervention meaningful. Though not assured of success, failure will not disqualify your species from future consideration, but success would immediately grant humanity full Alliance membership and all associated protections and benefits. Commander Torres was already running calculations on her tablet. Captain, our fastest ship would take 6 months to reach that system. By the time we could organize any kind of meaningful response, That limitation has been accounted for, the voice interrupted. Touch the guardian scale again, Dr. Chen. Sarah placed both hands on the crystalline object, and suddenly the air around them shimmered. Where there had been empty laboratory space, a complex control interface materialized, clearly alien in design but somehow intuitive to understand. This vessel has been equipped with quantum displacement technology, the voice explained. Dr. Chen's compassionate actions have earned her the right to serve as the interface between human technology and Alliance systems. Through her connection to the Guardian scale, your ship can now travel instantaneously to any location in the local galaxy. Sarah stared at the controls that had appeared around her. She could somehow sense how to use them, as if the knowledge had been planted directly in her mind during her contact with the dragon. More than that, she could feel the ship itself changing around them, becoming something more than human engineering had ever achieved. But why me? Sarah asked. I'm just a xenobiologist. You are the human who chose to spend 8 hours cutting through restraints to free a being in pain, despite having no idea what that being was or whether it posed a threat to you, the voice replied. You are the human who risked her own life because suffering was unacceptable to you. That is the kind of person we need as a bridge between species. Captain Morrison stepped forward. What about the rest of my crew? My ship? Earth? Your vessel will serve as the prototype for Human Alliance hybrid technology. Your crew will become the first humans trained in Alliance protocols. And Earth. The display shifted to show their home planet. Now, surrounded by a faint energy field that Sarah hadn't noticed before, Earth has been under Alliance protection since your species first achieved spaceflight. That protection will continue regardless of your choice, but it cannot last forever. The weight of the decision settled on all of them. Sarah could see her crewmates processing the implications. Not just for themselves, but for all of humanity. How long do we have to decide? Sarah asked. The attack on Kepler 442 will begin in 72 hours. If you choose to intervene, you must depart within 24 hours to have time to prepare. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her tablet where she'd been taking notes. And if we choose not to go, then another potential ally dies. And humanity continues under Alliance protection until such time as a more direct test becomes necessary. But Dr. Chen's actions have already earned your species consideration. That cannot be taken away. And in 7th, after the voice faded and the projections dimmed, the senior staff stood in silence for several minutes. Finally, Captain Morrison spoke. I need to contact Earth Command, he said. They need to know what's happening. Quote, Sir. Sarah interrupted gently. I don't think we have time for that. By the time we could explain this situation, get approval from the bureaucrats, and organize a proper response, it would be too late. You're suggesting we commit humanity to an interstellar conflict without authorization? Sarah looked around at her crewmates. These people she'd served with for 3 years, who trusted her scientific judgment, who had become like family to her. I'm suggesting we do what humans do best. We see someone who needs help, and we help them. We'll figure out the politics later. Commander Torres was studying the technical readouts the scale had provided. Captain, the technology they're offering us, it's incredible. Even if we lose this fight, what we'll learn could advance human civilization by centuries. Lieutenant Kim nodded agreement. And if we win, humanity gets a seat at the galactic table. Captain Morrison finished. Protection for Earth, access to Alliance knowledge, and the right to help shape galactic policy. Sarah felt the crystalline scale grow warm in her hands. There's something else, she said quietly. When I was connected to the dragon, I saw flashes of its memories. The Alliance isn't just about protection and cooperation. They're preparing for something bigger. There's a threat coming from outside this galaxy, something that makes the Ravagers look like children playing with toys. The Alliance is trying to unite as many species as possible before that threat arrives. The room fell silent again as the full scope of the situation became clear. Captain Morrison straightened his uniform and looked each of his officers in the eye. All right, people. We've got a decision to make. and we've got less than 24 hours to make it. Dr. Chen, can this Alliance technology get us to Kepler 442 and back? Sarah placed her hands on the scale again and felt the ship's new capabilities flow through her consciousness. Yes, sir. We can be there in minutes instead of months, and the ship's new weapons and defensive systems should level the playing field against Ravager technology. Torres, what do you need to integrate our systems with Alliance tech? Give me 12 hours and Dr. Chen's help as the interface, the engineer replied. I can have us ready to fight. Kim, prepare a message to Earth Command explaining the situation. We'll transmit it when we reach Kepler 442, so at least they'll know where we went. Aye, Captain. Morrison turned to Sarah. Dr. Chen, this was your discovery. Your choice to free that creature. I'm not making this decision without your input. Are you prepared to interface with alien technology and potentially lead humanity into its first interstellar war? Sarah thought about the dragon's ancient eyes, about the pain she had seen there, and the joy when she had freed it. She thought about the gratitude in its voice and the trust it had shown in her. But most of all, she thought about the species currently facing extinction in the Kepler 442 system. Beings she had never met, who didn't even know humanity existed, who were about to die unless someone chose to help them. Yes, Captain, she said firmly. Let's go save some lives. As her crewmates dispersed to prepare for what might be humanity's most important mission, Sarah remained alone with the crystalline scale. Its surface pulsed with gentle light, and she could feel the vast intelligence of the Alliance watching her, evaluating not just her words but her intentions. I hope we don't disappoint you, she whispered to the scale. In response, she felt a warm presence touch her mind. Not the formal voice of the Alliance, but something more familiar. The dragon she had freed was still connected to the scale, still watching over her, and its message was simple but profound. You have already exceeded all expectations. Now show the galaxy who humanity really is. The quantum displacement jump to Kepler 442 took exactly 1.3 seconds and changed everything Sarah thought she knew about physics. One moment they were floating in empty space near the asteroid field where she had freed the dragon, and the next they were in orbit around an alien world, unlike anything in human databases. The planet below them was beautiful in an otherworldly way. Instead of Earth's blues and greens, this world showed swirls of deep purple vegetation beneath golden clouds. 3 small moons hung in the lavender sky, and Sarah could see the geometric patterns of cities spreading across the major continents. But it was what surrounded the planet that made her heart sink. Dear God, whispered Lieutenant Kim from her position at the communications console. How many ships are there? Sarah felt the numbers flow through her connection to the crystalline scale. Over 3,000 Ravager vessels, she said quietly. Everything from small fighters to battleships the size of Manhattan. On the main screen, the Ravager fleet looked like a swarm of metallic insects surrounding their prey. The ships were dark, angular things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved in perfect coordination, tightening their formation around the planet like a closing fist. And the defenders? Captain Morrison asked. Sarah consulted the scale's data feed. 47 ships total. Most of them appear to be converted civilian vessels with improvised weapons. Commander Torres looked up from her engineering console, where Alliance technology now seamlessly integrated with human systems. Captain, the locals don't stand a chance. Even with our upgrades, we're still outnumbered 3,000 to 1. No, Sarah said firmly, surprising everyone, including herself, with the confidence in her voice. The numbers don't tell the whole story. She activated the holographic display, showing the tactical situation in 3 dimensions. The Ravager fleet was impressive. But as Sarah studied their formation through the lens of Alliance knowledge flowing from the scale, she began to see patterns. They're not here to conquer, she explained. They're here to harvest. Look at their positioning. They're surrounding the planet to prevent escape, but they're not in an attack formation. They're waiting for something. Waiting for what? Morrison asked. The answer came through the comm system as Lieutenant Kim's universal translator kicked in. A transmission was coming from the planet below, and the voice was filled with despair and determination in equal measure. This is Defense Commander Yorel of the Zephyrian Republic. We know you can hear us, Devourers. We will not surrender our children to your feeding machines. If you want our world, you will have to take it from our corpses. Another voice responded. This one cold and mechanical. Your resistance is irrelevant. Our bioprocessors require live subjects for optimal nutritional extraction. Your military forces will be consumed first to eliminate resistance. Then your population will be processed in order of nutritional value. Children and adolescents will be reserved for last to ensure maximum freshness. Sarah felt sick. Through the Alliance connection, she could sense the emotions of the planet's population. 8 billion beings, facing a horror beyond imagination, knowing they were about to watch their children be eaten alive. Captain, she said, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. I'm reading the Ravager operational plan through the Alliance database. They're going to spend the next 6 hours systematically destroying the planet's defenses, then begin landing bioprocessors. Machines that literally consume living beings and convert them into nutritional paste for the Ravager fleet. Morrison's jaw tightened. Options? Commander Torres was already running battle simulations. Sir, even with Alliance weapons, we can't take on 3,000 ships. Our best-case scenario is that we destroy maybe 50 of their vessels before they overwhelm us. Then we don't fight 3,000 ships, Sarah said, an idea forming as she studied the tactical display. We fight 1. She manipulated the holographic projection, highlighting a single massive vessel at the center of the Ravager formation. It was easily 10 times larger than any other ship in the fleet, and the data from the scale identified it as something called a hive mind nexus. All Ravager operations are coordinated through a single intelligence, Sarah explained. That ship contains the collective consciousness that controls the entire fleet. If we can disable it, the rest of the fleet becomes uncoordinated, Morrison finished. Brilliant. But how do we get through 3,000 ships to reach it? Sarah's connection to the crystalline scale deepened, and suddenly she could feel the Alliance technology throughout their ship as if it were part of her own body. The quantum displacement system, the enhanced weapons, the shields that bent space-time itself. All of it was designed to work through human intuition and determination, rather than pure computational power. We don't go through them, she said. We go around them. Commander Torres, can you reroute power from life support to the quantum displacement system? For how long? Just long enough for one jump. Right into the middle of their formation, the bridge fell silent. Lieutenant Kim was the first to speak. Sarah, that's suicide. Even if we disable their command ship, we'll be surrounded by 3,000 very angry aliens. Not if we time it right, Sarah said, calling up a new display that showed the planet's orbital mechanics. In 4 hours, this world's largest moon will pass between the planet and the Ravager fleet. For exactly 7 minutes, their formation will be partially obscured, and their sensors will be degraded. That's our window. Captain Morrison studied the plan. It's insane enough that it might work. But even if we succeed in disabling their command ship, how do we get out? Sarah smiled, feeling the dragon's presence warm and encouraging in her mind. We trust that the beings we're trying to save will help us when the time comes. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah worked with Commander Torres to integrate human tactical thinking with Alliance technology, creating weapon systems that could adapt and improvise in ways that purely alien tech couldn't. Lieutenant Kim established communication protocols with the Zephyrian Defense Forces, though Sarah insisted they not reveal the full scope of their plan. If the Ravagers detected coordinated action, they might change their formation. As the crucial moment approached, Sarah found herself alone on the bridge with Captain Morrison. The rest of the crew was at battle stations, ready for what might be humanity's first and last interstellar war. Any regrets, Doc? Morrison asked. Sarah thought about her quiet life as a xenobiologist, studying alien microbes and writing research papers that few people would ever read. Then she thought about 8 billion beings below them, preparing to die to protect their children. and about the warm gratitude in a dragon's ancient eyes. None, she said firmly. The moon's eclipse began exactly on schedule. As the massive satellite moved between them and the planet, Sarah felt the quantum displacement system come online. Through her connection to the scale, she could sense the Alliance technology reaching out, calculating distances and energy requirements with impossible precision. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced ship-wide. "We are about to do something that no human has ever done before. We are going to save an entire world from extinction. Whatever happens in the next hour, remember that we are representing not just ourselves, but all of humanity. Show them who we are." Sarah placed her hands on the crystalline scale and felt the ship around them shift into something more than the sum of its parts. Displacement in 3, 2, 1. Reality bent around them. They materialized less than 50 kilometers from the hive-mind nexus, so close that Sarah could see individual details on its hull. The massive ship was a nightmare of organic curves and metallic spines, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that reminded her sickeningly of a digestive system. "All weapons fire," Morrison commanded. The first salvo from their Alliance-enhanced weapons tore through the Nexus's shields like paper. But instead of exploding, the massive ship began to scream. Not through space, but directly into their minds. The sound was rage and hunger and alien intelligence so vast and cold that several crew members collapsed at their stations. "It's trying to take control of our minds," Torres shouted over the psychic noise, but Sarah was ready for this. Through the scale, she had learned about Ravager mental abilities. "Everyone, focus on why we're here," she called out. "Think about the families below us. Think about the children who are counting on us. Human emotion is chaos to them. They can't process it." The bridge crew began to recover as they followed Sarah's lead, filling their minds with thoughts of home, of family, of the desperate beings they were trying to save. The Ravager mental assault faltered as it encountered something it had never faced before. Sapient beings who fought not for territory or resources, but purely to protect others. Their weapons continued to hammer the Nexus, but the massive ship was incredibly resilient. Worse, the rest of the Ravager fleet was beginning to converge on their position. "Sarah, we need more power to punch through their hull," Torres reported. Through the Alliance connection, Sarah could feel the ship's capabilities. But she could also sense something else. The crystalline scale was offering her more power, but at a cost. Using it would create a permanent link between her consciousness and the Alliance network, changing her in ways she couldn't predict. Below them, she felt the first Ravager bioprocessors beginning their descent toward the planet. Sarah made her choice. She pressed both hands against the scale and opened her mind completely to the Alliance network. Power flowed through her like liquid starlight, and suddenly, she wasn't just connected to their ship, she was connected to every Alliance vessel within 100 light-years. The dragon she had freed was among them, along with dozens of others, all rushing toward Kepler 442 as fast as quantum displacement could carry them. But they were still minutes away, and the bioprocessors would reach the planet's surface in less than 1 minute. "Torres, I'm routing Alliance power directly through the scale," Sarah said, her voice carrying harmonics that sounded almost musical. "Target their primary neural cluster. I can see it through their hull." The next weapon blast was unlike anything in human military doctrine. Instead of simple energy or projectiles, it carried compressed quantum information designed to disrupt the specific type of consciousness that Ravager hive minds used. The beam punched through the Nexus's hull and struck something that wasn't quite brain and wasn't quite computer, but was definitely the core of their collective intelligence. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. 3,000 Ravager ships suddenly stopped moving in perfect coordination and began drifting in random directions. Some collided with each other, others fired on their own allies, and many simply shut down completely as their remote consciousness connection was severed. But the hive mind wasn't dead. It was angry. The Nexus turned toward their ship, and Sarah could feel its attention like a predator's gaze. Through the Alliance connection, she sensed its intention. If it couldn't coordinate its fleet, it would destroy the world itself, rather than let potential food escape. Energy began building in the massive ship's core, preparing to fire a weapon that would crack the planet below them like an eggshell. "They're going to sterilize the whole world," Torres reported in horror. Sarah felt the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on her consciousness. The Alliance ships were still too far away. The Zephyrian defenses were useless against this level of firepower, and their own ship couldn't possibly stop a planet-killer weapon. But through her expanded awareness, Sarah sensed something else. Something the Ravagers had overlooked in their hunger and cold intelligence. "Kim, open a channel to the Zephyrian Defense Forces," she ordered. "All frequencies, emergency priority. Channel open. This is Dr. Sarah Chen of the human vessel Harmony's Edge. The enemy is preparing to destroy your world rather than let you escape. But they've made one critical mistake. They don't understand what you're fighting for." Through the Alliance connection, Sarah could sense the confusion from the planet below. These beings had no idea who she was or why a single alien ship was fighting 3,000 enemy vessels on their behalf. "I'm going to share our ship's shield frequency with your defensive grid," Sarah continued. "When I give the word, link every power source on your planet. Every generator. Every solar collector. Every geothermal tap. Into your shields. You're not just protecting your cities anymore. You're protecting your children, your future, your right to exist as free beings. Show the galaxy what that's worth to you." The Nexus completed charging its planet-killer weapon. Sarah could feel the massive energies building, preparing to wipe out an entire world. "Now!" she shouted. What happened next had never been tried before in galactic history. An entire planet's population, united by a common threat and guided by human tactical thinking, linked their consciousness through their shared defensive systems. 8 billion minds focused on a single thought: protect the children. The combined shield that rose around Kepler 442 wasn't just technology. It was pure determination made manifest. When the Nexus's planet-killer beam struck it, the shield didn't simply absorb the energy. It reflected it back, multiplied by the collective will of every parent, every teacher, every adult who had ever looked at a child and promised to keep them safe. The reflected beam struck the Nexus with the power of an entire world's love for its children. The massive ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant by the very weapon it had intended to use for genocide. As the Alliance fleet finally arrived to deal with the scattered Ravager vessels, Sarah collapsed into her captain's chair, her consciousness slowly returning from the vast network to her own human mind. She was changed. She could feel Alliance knowledge and capabilities permanently integrated into her thoughts. But she was still fundamentally herself. "Sarah," Captain Morrison said softly, "what have you done?" She looked at the planet below, where cities were beginning to celebrate their impossible survival, where children were safe because a small crew of humans had decided that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the odds. "I think," Sarah said, watching as Alliance ships began coordinating with local forces to clean up the remaining Ravager vessels, "I just proved that humanity deserves its place among the stars." The dragon's presence in her mind was warm with approval, and through the Alliance network, she could feel similar emotions from hundreds of other ancient beings who had been watching this test with intense interest. The message that came through the crystalline scale was formal but filled with something that might have been joy. "Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Preservation Alliance, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth is designated as the first Human Alliance Coordinator. Welcome to the galactic community." As their ship began the journey back to Earth, this time using conventional faster-than-light travel so that Sarah could rest and recover, she found herself thinking about what lay ahead. Humanity would soon have access to technologies beyond their wildest dreams, protection from threats they didn't even know existed, and a voice in shaping galactic policy. But more than that, they had proven something important not just to the Alliance, but to themselves. When faced with impossible odds and innocent lives at stake, humans didn't calculate the probability of success. They simply asked themselves what was right, and then they did it. The dragon had been right to test them, Sarah realized. And humanity had passed that test, not through superior weapons or technology, but through the simple recognition that some things, like the laughter of children on a world they'd never seen, were worth any sacrifice to preserve. As Earth grew larger on their screens, Sarah smiled and gently touched the crystalline scale that had started this whole adventure. She could feel the vast network of Alliance worlds, all of them a little bit safer now because humans had chosen compassion over calculation. And in the depths of space, freed from ancient restraints by simple human kindness, a dragon sang songs of welcome to the newest members of the galactic family.